Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You are here for the XBRL US webinar, an SEC discussion on Inline XBRL for issuers. Thanks a lot for joining us. Before we get started, I just want to talk through a couple of logistical points. If you experience any problems during the webcast or have any issues with the dial-in, you can reach us by emailing support, SUPPORT, @xbrl.us, and we'll do our best to get you back and working again. As we go through the program, you can post questions. We'll be taking as many questions as we can during the Q&A period at the end. We are also holding a second call tomorrow, which is going to be an open Q&A call to get into more technical issues. So if for some reason your questions don't get answered today, there is another session tomorrow, and we'll be talking about that at the end of the program. To post questions, you'll see a little Q&A button at the top of your screen, and you can just click on that and input your question there, and then we'll put those into our queue. The call that we're holding tomorrow, just to tell you a little bit more about that, it may be of particular interest to tool and service providers. So we do encourage any service providers to join that call as well. And also, depending on the number of questions that we receive, we will likely hold additional conference calls with the SEC staff, who has kindly agreed to let us do that, to continue addressing vendor questions as all of you begin working through adapting tools to work with the Inline XBRL technical specification. We are offering CPE credit for the program today, and many of you have signed on for CPE. So if you have, please be sure to respond to the 4 questions that will be asked at 2 different points during the program. So I'd like to just go ahead and get started here. Just give a little bit of background. On Monday, June 13th, I think we're all aware that the SEC published an announcement stating that they plan to allow companies to submit their financial filings using Inline XBRL. Inline XBRL is a technical specification that was developed and is maintained by XBL International, which is the global standard-setting body for business reporting. And the goal of the webinar today is to provide you some background and to answer questions for both issuers as well as service and tool providers about how to work with the SEC as you implement Inline XBRL. So the first thing I want to do is introduce our speakers. And we're very pleased to have with us today a number of people from the SEC. We have Mike Willis, Assistant Director of the Office of Structured Disclosure, the Division of Economic and Risk Analysis, Walter Hampshire, who's a Senior IT Program Manager in the Office of Structured Disclosure, and Matt Slavin, Division of Economic and Risk Analysis. We also have with us John Turner, who's the CEO of XBL International, who will be here to help us learn a little bit more about the technical spec itself and what issuers we'll be working with. Here's a quick look at our agenda. We're going to have a review of the SEC order given to us by Mike Willis. Matt is going to give a demonstration of the Inline viewer. And then Walter is going to answer some questions about how Inline XBRL works within the Edgar system. And finally, John is going to talk to us a little bit about the Inline XBRL technical specification, and then we'll go straight to Inline to open Q&A. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in here. And the first kind of obvious question, Mike, for you is, tell us about the SEC order.
Sure. It enables voluntary filing of Inline XBRL formatted reports through March of 2020. I think folks know XBRL is an open standard. Inline XBRL is also an open standard. John Turner will talk about that more in a little bit. It applies to both US GAAP filers, domestic and foreign, so FPIs and US GAAP. We've incorporated some tools into Edgar. You're going to see some of those in a minute. So Matthew's got some pretty cool stuff to show you there. We think it provides benefits to companies both on quality and cost. On the quality side, you'll see this as Matt shows you the viewer, but it definitely gives you the ability to quickly find common problem topics in your report, as well as to find topics, disclosure topics. So many of the quality benefits really relate to the viewer. And the viewer also, as you would expect, allows reviewers to look at both the HTML and the XBRL. But in substance, that's an overview of the rule, of the exemptive order.
Mike, to some extent you answered a little bit of this, but can you elaborate a little more on the expected impact of Inline on filers and on users of data?
Well, we think on the filers, it will help on the quality side because the viewer really helps them see that, and you'll see that in a second. On consumers, because it's going to improve quality, we hope, we think that will be beneficial to the consumer community as well.
Okay, great. And why is the program voluntary rather than mandatory? What was the rationale?
Yeah, I think the rationale is like every other rule, there's a voluntary period at first, and so we just want to see how the market reacts and how the market feels about this, and we would love to hear from anybody in the community on what they think.
Great. Do you see this changing anything related to the taxonomy or to the SEC's process of approving annual taxonomy releases?
I do think it will have an impact. That impact is probably unknown at this moment, but because this is, the Inline is going to put the metadata directly in front of the reviewers, I think a lot of the element selection ideas may be more obvious to reviewers, and that may provide them with some questions and some ideas that would help to clarify the taxonomy. So I think that kind of input to the taxonomy team would be very useful. So I do think that that ability to actually see things more clearly rather than as two documents will have an impact on the quality of the taxonomy and on that whole entire process.
Will this change legal liability under Inline XBRL?
No. Short answer there is no. It will not change the legal liability situation at all on the filings.
Okay. And is management still responsible for certification of the financials, including the Inline XBRL?
Yes. So it won't change legal liability. It will not change certification either for the companies or for auditors.
Okay. And what, if anything, is going to change for IFRS and foreign private issuers?
Sure. IFRS FPIs do not have an approved taxonomy at this moment, so they will continue to file as they have, and they will wait until a IFRS taxonomy has been approved for their use, and at that moment, then they could voluntarily file Inline if they chose to do so. But they're going to need to wait for an approved IFRS taxonomy. And I would encourage them to stay tuned on that topic.
Okay. Okay, and I have one final question for you, and I'm sure there's going to be questions from the audience for you too, Mike, but can companies use Inline XBRL one period and then switch back to HTML and XBRL separately in subsequent periods during this voluntary program?
Yes, absolutely, Michelle. Yes, the intent of the exemptive order is to allow the market participants to experiment and to try the Inline idea, see how it suits them, and to experiment and provide us with feedback. And so absolutely they could do Inline one period and then switch back to the HTML with the separate XBRL. The next period, it's up to them. If they qualify to file an Inline, they can do it on a voluntary basis whenever they choose.
Okay, great. Okay, hang on one second, let's see.
I do think, Michelle, that you know, the overview of the exemptive order is probably not as exciting as actually just seeing it. So I've intentionally kept my comments short so that Matthew and Walter and John could spend more time actually talking about and showing people the viewer and what's possible in an Inline environment, because I think that's pretty exciting. But I'm happy to take any other questions.
Okay, so why don't we, I'm going to, you know, to that point, Mike, let's turn it over to Matthew now, who's going to actually give us a demonstration of the Inline viewer and talk about it a little bit. And then we will have question time at the end. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen And Matthew, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Sure thing. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay, can you see what looks like a financial statement?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Great. So thanks, everyone. The inline viewer that I'm about to show you allows users to navigate, review, and search the contents of an Inline XBRL filing, whether it's a quarterly or an annual filing. And instead of the two documents, one HTML and one XBRL instance, the inline document merges both the tagging and the presentation into a single document. As a result, there's no need for a separate tagged copy of the filing data in an XBRL instance. So the actual filing data has these metadata tags applied directly to the data. So this is going to help in hopefully simplifying the reporting creation while assisting with the data access and quality by enhancing the capabilities available to users when reviewing the filing. So the first thing you'll notice looking at this is it looks just like any regular HTML filing. That's because it is a filing. This example we have here is just a fictitious company for this demonstration. And if you scroll down, the first thing you'll notice is that every one of the facts have these little red borders around it. You can see on the right-hand side here, and then parenthetically within line items itself. And then we also have a toolbar across the top, which I'm going to talk about in a little more detail as we go on. So the first thing, simply hovering over any one of these facts, and I'll just choose cash equivalents. You hover over it, and it will show you some basic information about that particular fact. So it's revealing the metadata that's underneath, all the tagging. So it's showing you the tag, the period, measure, and some other information. If you drill down on that information, you'll get a little pop-up that provides all of the details, what we call the attributes, all of the labels that are used for this particular fact using this element, its references, and the calculation for this particular item, which, as you can see, adds to current assets. So all that information can be copied if you want to just copy it and paste it to something else. So the idea being that you can hover over anything that you want, you can drill down, and then get to the details. So that's the basics of the HTML view. These little highlight borders are going to change dynamically based upon your search and your filtering, which I'm going to walk into next. But the first thing I want to show you is on the upper left-hand side of this toolbar, it says sections, and in this example, it's 8. And if you expand that, it's going to provide what is essentially a table of contents. So you can expand notes to financials and then say jump right to your segment information footnote. So it's going to help you navigate the document more easily by just being able to jump to different sections. If I select document and entity, it's going to take me right back to the top of the document. Now you can also use this little search box here. So if I type in segments, it's just going to give you a filtered list. So you can, again, more easily get to a particular section of the filing. As you know, some of the reports can be rather large and have a lot of different footnotes. So this is a quick way to get to it. So that's the navigation piece to this, and you can expand that or collapse it, and it lets you get at it. All of these facts that are tagged here that have these little borders around them, you can also access them through what we call our fact list. And that's actually on the other side of the toolbar at the top, where it says 245. And in this example, we have 245 different tagged facts, whether that's numeric or textual data. And let me just scroll down to show you. The text information is also highlighted, and the information within the text footnotes. So you can access this at any of the different levels of tagging. But for this fact list, if I expand this, just like I did that section, it'll show me a listing of everything that's been tagged. So I can jump right to a certain item that's been tagged within the financial statement. You can navigate the entire document this way using this little navigation controls at the top by item or by page. You can get to the whole document this way. So this is sort of aligned with the highlighting here in the main body of the document itself. Let me just hide that real quick. One powerful feature of this is the ability to search the document. So we have this search box up here, and you can type in keywords, multiple keywords also, to find the information, not only what's present in the HTML, but also the XBRL metadata underneath, so you can search that. So if you were to search, simply type in the word cache, click the search button. It brings back 18 facts here. You can see that anything with cache is highlighted in this orange highlighting. I can scroll down to the cash flow statement, you'll see the items there as well. So just a simple cache search brought back anything that says cache in the financial statement or has cache in the XBRL element or label. That's a basic search. And this search supports operators, the and or operator as well. So if you want to say you're searching for this and this or this, you can do that as well. If I jump to the menu here, there's a settings option. Let me just open that up. And the search that we just did, you can actually expand the scope of that search to include other metadata in XBRL. So right now you'll see by default, I have include labels, and then I just deselected include references. You can also search the definition, which is the documentation label for each element. You can search the dimensions, so the axes and members in there as well. So you can change the scope to sort of fit your need for what you're searching. So I have include references on here, and I can perform a search with that now. I can search the reference information that's embedded within a document. So if I want to type something like FASB and I think it's 715, which is pension benefits. So the accounting standards update associated with pension benefits. And I just click the search button, and it's going to find two facts. It's going to find the pension and other post-retirement liabilities has this ASU associated with it for the element that it's using. So if I select references, you'll see the ASU for 715 is right there. So this is really handy if you're looking for something related to a certain accounting pronouncement or the FASB codification. You can quickly get a listing of those related elements by searching that information. If you want to clear any search, you just press this little X in the box, and it just brings you back to the full number of facts, the 245 that we started with in that search. So that's the search. It's powerful, and you can change the scope of it. It's really handy and looking for certain information based on different criteria. Now, to the right of that, we have some sections. One says data, one says tags, one says more. And these are our filters. So to make it easy to do some reviewing of the XBRL data, and that you want to sort of pinpoint and get to a subset of that data, you can use these filters very easily. And if I just select the data one, it's going to allow me to just quickly pull a filter. If I just want to look at just amounts, just text, and what you'll see is the information on the right updates automatically whenever I change that filter, and it's also going to impact the highlighting. So I've just chosen text items, so it's only going to have those little borders around anything that's text. So I can change that also to, you have calculations, negative only, additional items, which is anything that's hidden in the document, if you know Inline. So if I wanted to see just items that have calculation, I can do that. There's 169 facts that have calculations. And you can chain this information. So if you see along the bottom here, there's a little chain. If I add additional filters, so if I just want to look at custom tags that have calculations, it'll just start building this little chain of filters. And now I've got these 6 items that are custom tags with calculations. And you can remove these individually or just clear them all if you want to. You can also, we have a lot more filters in here that are handy. If you want to specify just looking at certain periods of information, you want to look at 2015 data, it's going to highlight that. It's going to update your list on the right of just things are tagged with, for 2015. Or you can specify a certain period just by selecting and deselecting as many of these as you want. We also have measures, so if you have different measurements like shares, we'll look at just share items, you can do that. Also axes, so we don't have many in this is just a small sample, but any dimensions would be listed in here. So if I want anything that's, for example, on the business segment, I can just bring those right back and once you jump right to them and you can review them. See everything that's using the business segment axes. And just clear these again. There's a number of other ones there in the filters. So that's basically what this tool allows you to do, to navigate, to filter down, and to perform searches. Now, when you're using these filters, so if I just want to say, I'm only interested in the custom tags, and you can, this search feature actually works with a filter. So if you want to search, I don't know, let's just search, not too many options here, but if I want to do Goodwill, that search will work within the currently selected filters. So it really allows you to get quickly to any data that you want to see and clear those filters in that search whenever you want. So this is really handy. But just think about this. If you're reviewing a filing, you can see if something stands out and it wasn't in 2015 and you expected it to have a certain reporting period and it doesn't, or something that wasn't tagged would be obvious. Something that was missing a calculation, you'll be able to see very quickly just by using these different filters whether or not the right metadata was applied to this. So it's a handy review tool as well as a way to get at data quickly within a filing. Also from the menu, you can save your XBRL instance here locally or the entire zip file package of files. As I showed you the settings before, you can change the color. If you want to change the color of the highlighting or any of the highlights or search results, you can do that here and change it. You can also hide the mouse over display over each fact if that's annoying you. So the last thing I want to show you, second to last thing I want to show you is that we have help content here too. So if you just want to know how to do something within the viewer, it's just right there at your fingertips. Just a quick summary of what each one of these things does and how to use them. We also provide some basic information about the filing. So if you want to see just some summary information, and this is kind of handy, you'll be able to see the breakdown of custom to standard tag rates by different types of tags. So you can see that this particular filing has 7% custom tags, and then you can see if any of those are axes or members, or what we label here as primary tags. So that covers the viewer, and I think we're going to jump into some questions now. Over to you, Michelle.
Matthew, thanks very much. We've been getting lots of questions actually, and let me just ask a couple, not all of them because we have like 27 open questions right now, but just a couple specific to the viewer. One question was, has the viewer been tested across multiple browsers?
Good question. So the answer to that is yes. It's been tested across all the modern browsers that are commonly used, Chrome, Edge, IE 10 and up. It'll support those major browsers. It'll also work on your iPhone or your iPad too, which is really neat. So we built some support into that to make the tool work from the mobile devices as well.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I'm just looking for other questions specific to this.
If this helps anyone on the technical side, this whole thing is written using JavaScript, so it runs within your browser locally. There's nothing that has to be installed.
Okay, another question, how is the inline viewer accessed? Anytime someone views a tagged filing on the SEC website, this functionality will automatically be built in to whatever browser is being used, or is there a special program required?
It's a good question. So when you go to the filing page, the existing rendering engine viewer that's there will still be there, but you'll be able to select this inline file and it will just open that the filing directly with this tool.
Okay, great. Another question, is the viewer available for integration with software tools?
It's a good question. That's our plan, yes, to make the source code available to anyone who wants to use it. And
great.
That should hopefully be happening. If anyone else wants to weigh in there, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I think we're going to move on to CPE questions now. And, you know, as I said, there's lots of questions coming in. We probably will not be able to get to all of these, but we'll plan on you know, making sure that everybody's questions are answered. And I'd like to put together a Q&A that we post a little bit later on too. So, but so right now, let's move on to CPE questions because we still have a lot to cover. And Matt, thanks very much. The first CPE question for those who are getting CPE is what you see on the screen here. The recent SEC order permitting Inline XBRL mandates the use of, your choices are XBRL, Inline XBRL, HTML and XBRL together, or none of the above. Okay, so just record your response. And I'm going to give you just a few, not sure how many people are looking for CPE, but we'll just give this a few minutes, and we'll move on to a second poll. But if you are getting CPE, make sure that you respond to this, or you won't be able to get your CPE credit. Okay, and we're going to go on to the second CPE question now. The recent SEC order permits the use of Inline XBRL until March 2020, indefinitely, or March 2025. So again, please just click on the button to make your choice, and we will be posting the responses to these questions in an email that comes out to the group on tomorrow. Okay, so if you could just put in your answers, and we're going to be closing this poll in just a few seconds here. Okay, great. Okay, all right, thanks everybody, and I'm now going to share my screen again, and we're going to move on to the next part of our presentation. And we're going to move to Walter Hampshire. So Walter is going to tell us.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Walter. He's going to tell us a little bit about how Inline XBRL is going to work with Edgar. So the first question we have is, how does Inline XBRL work within Edgar?
Well, if you're familiar at all with the Edgar submission process, you know that there is a primary document on every submission, and then there's a set of file attachments, which are the XBRL exhibits. So there's an instance document, there's a schema, there's link bases. Here's the primary difference, which is there is no instance document in the submission. Instead, all of the content and all the rules and all the requirements for what you are supposed to tag in terms of content are going to be in the primary document. So the primary document is still a .htm extension file, but it is an Inline XBRL file. Now, that means that there's no ex101.ins. In fact, if you tried to submit something which had a primary document that was Inline XBRL, along with an instance document attachment, that would be rejected, right? You can't do both. It's one or the other. The thing I have to emphasize here is that what we're talking about is the same content. So there's really no difference at all in terms of what your link bases contain, what your schemas contain, or even the individual facts, what is supposed to be tagged doesn't affect anything about members, doesn't affect anything about what footnotes have to be tagged. The content requirements are exactly the same. It's only a question of where you're putting the tags now. You're putting them into the Inline XBRL document. Now, the second thing about how Inline works within Edgar, those of you who have been working with Edgar for a while will know that about 9 months ago, we essentially merged the validation and rendering functions into a single process, if you will, so that basically you couldn't get a rendering unless it was valid, and if you got validation, then you would get rendering. It's really very much the same thing. So here's the way it works in Edgar now. Still true. There's a process which will do a first pass validation on your primary document if it's Inline XBRL. So you upload your Inline XBRL document, it's your 10Q. Before it even gets into Edgar, there's a validation that will go on to just make sure that it's well formed and that that it's basically that it is Inline XBRL without really applying any Edgar specific tests. Okay, so there's a very quick test that will prevent you from just submitting stuff that can't even be processed. Then it goes into the real validation, which applies all of the same Edgar filer manual rules that you already know and love. And so consequently, it will validate. If it validates, then it goes through. If it doesn't validate, here's an important difference. The entire filing will be rejected because in effect, it would be stripping off the primary document. If you strip off the primary document of a 10Q, it's not a 10Q anymore. So the whole thing gets rejected. So an Inline XBRL submission is very much an all or nothing thing. It's not like the current process with XBRL where you essentially can get your XBRL stripped off and the rest of the filing goes through so that you have to submit an amendment. Okay, no more. With Inline XBRL, that is not what happens. It's either all or nothing. Now, another thing that happens in validation and rendering are there are now two new outputs of that process. Okay, here are the two new outputs of the process. There is a file which we call the metalinks file, which is used to support the inline viewer. We'll come back to that in a minute. The other output of that process is an extracted instance document. So in other words, the thing that comes out of this process, the extracted instance document, looks for all the world like an ordinary XBRL instance document. It's got all the tags you put in your Inline XBRL document. It's got all the context, it's got all the units, it's got everything, got all the declarations, got all the schema, all that stuff, right? But it's now in a separate instance document, which if you wanted to, you could then process as an ordinary XBRL document. Now, public dissemination stream, which is where the content for the website comes from, includes both of those files, at least for now, at least until March 2020, I suppose. So in other words, you have an inline document. What goes in is your inline document plus the supporting schemas and link bases. What comes out is what you submitted, plus this extracted instance, plus this metalinks file, plus all the usual rendering files, the filing summary, the R files, and so on. Okay, now, when it comes out on the SEC website, somebody looking at the 10Q, just the main page where you have the 10Q at the top and you have some exhibits, and then down at the bottom you have a bunch of XBRL filings. When they click on that HTML document, they're going to get a big surprise, which is the inline viewer. It's just going to come right up. Right? So in other words, you can still look at the underlying file if you want in a browser, but it's that much integrated into the website. And the reason we can do that is because the metalinks file is already right there. It's already been produced. It's all ready for the inline viewer to go. And furthermore, if you are using the output stream via RSS or some other method, here's the thing to know about the zip file. Right? The zip file is where you normally pull down the instance and its supporting files. That zip file, it follows the existing principle, which is it only includes what the filer produced. I'm sorry, what the filer submitted. It doesn't include any Edgar output. And so therefore, you can conclude from that that it will have the inline XBRL document, plus the supporting link bases and schemas. Now, the instance document that looks just like an old-fashioned XBRL document will still be there. It's still in the same folder, still the same year at a completely predictable URL. It's easy to find if you know the names of the files and where you got the zip file from. And so consequently, I understand that there are concerns about exactly how downstream processing software will work, but we've done everything we can within the scope of Edgar to actually pre-process that into a form that is as close as possible to the thing that you normally process without violating this very important principle, which is the zip file contains only what the filer submitted, no more, no less. I know, long answer to a short question. Next question, Michelle?
Sure. No, that was really, really helpful. Will the SEC have any further guidance?
Well, I think we're not going to be setting any new precedents about how the SEC provides guidance. Let me say this, however, in that sense, I mean, it's either a rule that goes into the filer manual or it's an FAQ or some other kind of filer guidance. And those things are relatively terse, I guess is the word that I would use. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason for the voluntary program is because this is the time in which we should be getting a lot of conversation and a lot of feedback so that we can do guidance and appropriately either put that guidance, encode that guidance as rules to be enforced by the Edgar validator or in some other form. So I wouldn't say that there's any decisions yet made about exactly what form the guidance takes or how deep it would go. I will say this, that the next few months are pretty critical in terms of filers and vendors giving us some feedback about what that guidance will need to be. And I don't mean, they don't need to tell us what the Q&A needs to be, but if you don't ask questions, then we won't know what the frequently asked questions are going to be, and therefore we won't necessarily know what we need to answer in advance. And so that's kind of a non-answer, I know, but we can't really say what we will do. I will say that it won't change the process by which we normally give guidance.
Okay, and actually that leads to the next question, which is an obvious one. So what should filers do, or vendors for that matter, when they have a question?
I'm not, in a way, I'm not the right person to ask, because my first inclination is if I were paying someone to help me with my XBRL, they would be the first person that I would ask. Mm-hmm. And if that vendor didn't know, I might think about getting another one. The vendors should feel free to come directly to us through the structured data email address. And once again, it's like anything else. You don't really know exactly how quickly you'll get a response or what the response is going to be, which is why you're asking the question. But now is definitely the best time to be providing those questions and feedback so that we know, essentially what can we fix, what can we make better, what can we make clearer. Now that's not advice. That's certainly not an SEC official position. But if I were in the position of a filer, it's certainly what I would do.
Great.
I would expect my vendor to know a lot more about it than I do.
Right. So then just a couple more questions for you, of our prepared questions, Walter, and then we'll take a few of the questions that have come in. But is there anything that's not obvious about the inline exemptive order that hasn't been addressed?
I love this question. This is an awesome question, and here's why. There is something that's not obvious, I think. Here's what's not obvious. The exemptive order is only covering the question of who and when and why some filer can do inline XBRL. Okay? It is saying very little, if anything at all, about exactly how to do it. If you want to know how to do it, that is in the Edgar filer manual. And so consequently, I think that's not obvious. If you want to know, for example, who should do it and what filings are covered and so on, you should be able to infer all of that from the exemptive order, and you won't find anything about it in the Edgar Filer Manual. The Edgar Filer Manual adds a chapter SAF 5.2.5, which is merely about the filing format. It's nothing about the content or who or when or why. All right. Now here's the other thing that's not obvious about the exemptive order. I'm just looking at one of the questions here. I should move on because I'm running out of time. Okay. That's it. That's the important thing. Don't look in the Edgar Filer Manual for any questions about who or why or anything like that. The exemptive order tells you all of that. And don't look in the exemptive order to figure out anything about the technology. So for example, okay, here's an example. At the very end of the exemptive order, there's some word there about, you know, what the software distribution will be. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And it's actually kind of vague. And that is by design because that's not policy, right? That's just something that we're working very hard on to actually get to you as soon as possible. Okay, next question.
Okay, so basically, everybody should read both the exemptive order and the Edgar Filer Manual to get the full picture.
Right.
Okay, so my last prepared question for you today, Walter, is who is using Inline XBRL today?
Foreign countries. So United Kingdom, I believe they have been using Inline XBRL for quite a while. John Turner's on the phone. He's probably in a much better position to answer that, frankly. I guess I would say that we have been wanting to get to this point for some time now because of all the advantages that Mike Willis talked about. And, you know, one of the things essentially we wanted to wait for was until we really had a nice software solution for actually using and viewing the thing. And I think, you know, frankly, I think the demo you just saw showed that we achieved that. We've got something very nice for using the filing. It's not a tagging solution, but it sure does make the experience of actually interacting with an Inline XBRL document really fabulous.
Hey, Michelle, if I could just interject before you jump into next questions, and I apologize, I should have gotten this out of the way to begin with, but our disclaimer needs to be put on the record that the SEC, as a matter of policy, disclaims responsibility for private publication or statement by its staff and employees, and the views that we're expressing are our own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the commission or other members of the staff of the commission. So I apologize for not getting that up front, but I definitely wanted to get it on the record.
No, that's great, Mike. Thank you. Walter, Matthew, do you need to state that as well?
No, we're covered. We're covered.
I think he's covered us.
Speaking to me. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions here, Walter, and if there's some that you see that you think are particularly pertinent, because there's so many of them, and then I think what we'll probably do is create a Q&A document to give people answers to a bunch of these questions. So just a couple quick ones. Can you still extract the 6 XBRL file set from the Inline XBRL viewer if any user has the need for it?
Walter, you may be on mute.
Yes, during Matt's demo, if you notice in the upper left-hand corner, there was a menu item. There were 2 of them, Save XBRL Instance and Save XBRL Zip File. Saving the XBRL Zip file basically drops out, you know, the entire package, all the schemas and link bases and so on. Saving the XBRL instance is the thing which extracts just the XBRL tags, drops the HTML, and produces a old-fashioned type of XBRL instance document.
Okay, great. Let's see, I'm just going through a lot of viewer questions here.
53 of these questions. They're all good ones, too.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, 52 of them. I see one from Lewis.
All right, no personalities here. Okay, question is, when will the source code be available to be made publicly available?
Well, The portion of the software that validates, renders, extracts, and produces the metalinks file is already there. Okay, it's already up there. It's in several different forms.
Okay.
And we're working on, and we're getting the rest ready. Matt's demo showed you an example filing. That filing would be included, all the JavaScript. I mean, if it's on the web, we didn't try and obfuscate any of the JavaScript code. So, you know, it's just actual source code that you can use.
Okay. And just one last question for you, Walter, before we move on to John, is to clarify, a company files a 10K with Inline XBRL and we'll see the same typical rendering plus the separate iXBRL view. Is that correct?
No, they're one and the same. I mean, in other words, it depends on how you open the document. If you just have the document as an ordinary HTML file and you open it in a browser without going through the viewer, then it's going to look for all the world like a normal HTML file. That same identical file passing through the inline viewer will have all the additional functionality, the bells, whistles, boxes, colors, search, and so on.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to move on to John Turner. And Walter, thank you very much.
Hey, can I just ask a question? If I were to answer some of these questions in text, in the text thing here as I'm watching the questions go by, is that okay? Because some of them are, you know, pretty straightforward. And if I answer them, will they go to everyone?
Yes, I mean, you
Walter.
could.
Hi, Walter, this is David. There's a little checkbox that says send privately. And if you check that checkbox that says send privately, then only that person that posed the question will get the answer.
No, I mean for everybody to see the answer.
Then don't check that box.
Okay, but it's okay if I do that. I guess this is more of a question for Mike, I suppose. I mean, some of these are very simple to answer, and I'd like to do it right away.
Yep, let them rip.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay. And then if we will provide all the questions to the SEC staff, and then if we can get answers to those, I think we create a document and post it, do a little FAQ that we can post on our site and send that to everybody. Okay, so go ahead, Walter, and John, I've got a couple of questions for you.
Michelle, I hate to step in. Can I run a quick poll question for CPE?
Oh, okay, I was going to do the polls after John, but we can do that. Okay. Sure. Okay, we're going to do two more CPE questions here. So for those of you who are interested in getting CPE, just make sure that you respond to these. So in the SEC order, public companies will be allowed to submit a first choice Inline XBRL in addition to the HTML or ASCII text document, Inline XBRL as a replacement to the HTML or ASCII text, or Inline XBRL in addition to the HTML document and the XBRL document. So just click on the one that's appropriate and then submit your response. And we will have one more poll question after this. Okay, so we've closed that poll, and now we have one last poll question. As you can see on the screen, the Inline XBRL technical spec is used to create a combined HTML and XBRL document, or a combined ASCII text and XBRL document, or two separate documents, one XBRL and one is HTML. So again, just click on the button that you think is most appropriate, submit your response, and then we will send the answers to these questions out to the group in an email tomorrow. So just a few more seconds to complete the last poll. Okay, great. Okay, thank you for submitting those responses. And now we're going to go to John Turner from XBRL International. John, can you tell us a little bit about XBRL International's role in developing specifications?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Michelle. And I'll try to be brief so that we can get to some more questions and you can ask those of any one of us on the call. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time. Just to put this into context, XBRL International is the global not-for-profit standards development organization, and we're responsible for the business reporting standard. So we're a public interest body, we have a public interest purpose, and our purpose is to enhance accountability and transparency in business performance around the world. So you can think about XBRL as the main way of moving paper to data in terms of financial and risk reporting and other kinds of performance reporting around the world. Our standards are open, they're freely licensed, there are no license fees ever. And as you probably know, we're an open consortium. We're made up of around 650 organizational members from around 40 countries. And very importantly, that comprises both private sector and public sector groups who are collaborating on this effort to improve reporting. And we largely rely on membership to cover the costs that we incur in developing and maintaining these standards, as well as delivering education and guidance around the world. And around the world is important. Many of you will be familiar with XBRL as a standard used in the United States for providing filing to the SEC and to the FDIC within the banking community, and it impacts something like 14,000 companies in the United States. Around the world, just over 100 regulators do exactly what the SEC and the FDIC do, often in their own slightly different ways, but and collecting different information. But they're collecting that information in about 60 countries, and they're collecting information in XBRL format from more than 10 million companies around the world. It's used for financial statements and risk returns and tax returns and statistical returns and a bunch of other stuff. Now, around about 3 million of those companies use Inline XBRL to file financial statements to regulators, and they've been doing that since 2011. Many of you may be aware that if you file your financial statements, or when you file your financial statements as part of your tax return in the United Kingdom, for example, that must go in Inline XBRL. And similarly, the Japanese authorities have been using XBRL in an inline form for a number of years now, as has Denmark. But we're very pleased to see that the US is joining in. So all of our standards are open. They're available from our website, which is xbrl.org. And you can also connect to our site from the US jurisdiction, XBRL US, and that's xbrl.us. Also a not-for-profit helping improving reporting around the world. So XBRL International standards are prepared using a pretty onerous process. It's based very largely on the processes used by the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, that define the standards for web pages and other things. They're developed by technical experts that are working within our working groups, and those standards go through multiple rounds of public review. And at any one point of time, you can see it on the website, there's various new specifications or enhancements to existing specifications that are being worked on collaboratively. Inline is, or XBRL Inline, is a pretty simple standard in some respects. And I think this might be your next question, Michelle, so I'll pause. Yes, how does Inline XBRL work? I'm not going to go through all the nuts and bolts, but I'll give you a couple of very simple tips. Inline XBRL is taking advantage of capabilities that are baked right into HTML, which is the standard that sits behind web pages around the world. And those capabilities allow us to put in additional tags which browsers don't read or don't display, but that a machine can go along and pick up. And this gives rise to the most important aspect that, you know, I think Walter and Matt and Mike have all referenced, but is the whole purpose of Inline XBRL is so that you can file a single document. That single document is human readable and it's machine readable. And the very same fact that you'll read is the very same fact that the computer will consume. And that's done by inserting these tags, which are invisible to the reader, the human reader, but very visible to the computer, on either side of the text. So if the text says 100, and that's 100,000, because it says thousands in a column above it, then there's instructions either side of that tag that says this is profit or whatever the number might be, and gives you the context and the concept that you're dealing with, as well as information about how to transform that from, say, individual units into thousands. That process is right in front of you, and that viewer that Matt has provided hopefully makes that very, very obvious. But from an international perspective, we consider it highly undesirable to have dual filing. It means much more work for everybody involved in the process. So we applaud the SEC for going down this path. Do you want to move on, Michelle?
Sure. The next question is, are there tools available that U.S. issuers are going to be able to leverage?
So look, there are lots of tools that are capable of producing inline XBRL right around the world already in use today. I don't expect that's suddenly going to change the software or service environment in the United States. For those of you that are filing to the SEC, I expect you'll continue to be using the software that is provided by your existing software vendors and your existing service providers. That process is a relatively simple thing for those software vendors to take into account. We've seen some vendors adopt Inline XBRL extremely quickly. One of the neat things, one of the simple things, or the shortcuts, if you like, and this might be of interest to some of you, but it certainly is of interest to all of the vendors, is that this is just sitting inside an HTML document. So you can, right in your browser, right-click, view source, and see exactly how a particular document is constructed. As Walter mentioned, this continues to take advantage of extensions. Those extensions continue to be provided in the US context as an additional exhibit, but the instance document is constructed from this inline document, which is viewable by the machine and humans at the same time. So I wouldn't expect that your vendors will have difficulty making that shift. I would expect that you will find it simpler to deal with Inline XBRL as the same document, one and the same document. That's certainly been the experience in other parts of the world.
Great. And one last question for you, John. How challenging do you think it will be for issuers to transition to Inline XBRL?
Again, I think that this should be very simple, and I think that the SEC has made some good decisions by, for example, providing the viewer that Matt described and making that open source so that vendors can bake that into their systems so that you'll be able to see that exactly the way that the SEC will see it, and other market participants will see it when you file it to the SEC before you've done so. So that's going to make that process simpler. It should make review simpler for you. It should make the construction of your XBRL filings much simpler. But I would give one word of warning, which is that I think that everybody that's involved in this process needs to consider from the outset how they're going to be conducting that review. So talk to your accounting professionals, talk to your vendors, talk to your service providers about what will be the process for ensuring that you're happy that what is baked into this document and is your communication to the world is precisely the way you want it to be. So think about that. There are plenty of tools on commercial tools. There are now an open source application that you'll be able to leverage as well. So hopefully that should be a straightforward transition for those people that are going to take advantage of this new opportunity that the SEC order has provided.
Great, John. Thanks very much. Okay, let's go straight to, well, we did our CPE questions. We got that out of the way, so we can go straight to Q&A. And I'm going to open, these are questions for everyone on the line here, for all of our speakers. And let me just start kind of going through these methodically, because there's a lot of them. Okay, so how do you tag DEI elements like current reporting status, entity filer category, etc.? I'm not sure who would be appropriate to answer that one.
That would be me.
That would be you? Okay, great, Walter.
So as the Edgar Filer Manual explains, there are certain facts required in an XBRL instance document which do not normally appear on the face of a HTML submission. So like the CIK number is a good example. That is one of the few cases where we think and know, in fact, that you should take that fact and tag it inside the hidden element of the instance. The hidden element can be overused, and we intend to find ways to discourage that. But clearly there are some things like the CIK number, the amendment flag. There are other things that don't necessarily appear on the cover page that are nevertheless tagged. For example, as a rule of thumb, you might consider that you should only put DEI elements into the hidden section. As a rule of thumb.
Walter, this is Matthew. I just want to add to that in the inline viewer, there's an option to view all of those items. What we call them additional items in the viewer. So there's an option to just review those.
Yep.
Okay. The next question, is there any cost associated with filing in Inline XBRL? Maybe John, I don't know if you want to take that question.
Sure. Is there any cost? I mean, it's going to depend on your software vendors. Most software vendors have discovered that this is a simpler way to construct their XBRL documents, but I can't predict exactly how this will work in the United States. And of course, although the SEC indicated pretty clearly that it was planning on making this announcement at some point in the future, vendors haven't known that until just last week, and are no doubt all having to make their own decisions about what to do from a technical perspective as well as a commercial perspective. So sorry, that's not very helpful, but this is not a big change.
Okay. If a filer elects to participate in the voluntary program, are they still required to file the current XBRL exhibit? That may be a question for Walter or Matthew.
Okay, so as I said, not the EX101 INS, so not the instance document, but yes, all the other files, the schema and the link bases.
Okay, great.
You know, one of the things we probably should have mentioned here, something that's not obvious about the exemptive order, pay attention to the fact that it's only for corporate filers. None of the voluntary program is not open to mutual funds.
Okay. Next question, how is it possible to view calculation and presentation relationships?
Matt?
Sure, Walter, I'll answer this one. The calculation relationships, as you saw, were shown when you drill down on a particular fact, you get that detail. One of the options was to view the calculations. Regarding the presentation relationships, we didn't feel that we needed to expose those through the inline viewers, but they're available through the rendering engine as they currently are today.
Okay, great. And this is, I think, another viewer question. Can you use COD references to identify related tagged facts in the document?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what the demo was, I think.
Okay.
Unless I misunderstood the question. Read the question again.
It's, can you use COD references to identify related tagged facts in the documents?
Yes, that was part of Matt's demo where he was he did a search on FASB something something, and it was searching references and popping up just the fact. It was basically highlighting in yellow just the facts that used that FASB reference. So if that's the same thing as using the codification references, then yes, that's what it did.
Okay. Are there SEC...
And Michelle, just one thing I wanted to add. That question before about presentation, I mean, that's again, feedback. That's something that folks think is really important to be able to show through the inline viewer. That's something we can always add if there's a demand for it.
Okay. Okay. Are there SEC samples available, like the one being demonstrated? Do you have any other inline XBRL samples?
That sample will be made available very soon.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. And I know we're running a little bit over here, but we'll just take a couple more questions. see. Is there a validation when we tag the same element context combination to 2 or more different facts?
Right, so I tried to avoid too many answers that were really kind of, those are inline XBRL functionality questions, not so much about our program. So the short answer is yes, but probably an unsatisfying answer suggests you look at the sample or go back to the inline XBRL spec. You can wrap as many numeric tags around a number as you feel like you should.
Okay. Do we still need to tag asterisk footnotes?
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to find ones that are a little more general. Are you able to use custom tags for inline XBRL during the voluntary filing period?
Yep.
Of course. Yep.
I mean, there's no such thing as a custom inline tag, of course.
Right.
But like I said, all the things that you do and all the content requirements that you currently have to satisfy still apply to the document.
Okay.
Walter, if I could just clarify that just for 1 second. I agree with you entirely, but I think it's really important that everybody understands that inline XBRL is merely a way of converting text that's sitting on a human readable page into XBRL. So nothing changes about XBRL. The XBRL instance is still in there behind the scenes, but it's been converted by the inline instructions that are embedded in the web page.
Okay. Here's a question about a further demonstration, and maybe Matthew, you could just explain, how does the viewer present dimensionally tagged facts? Are there any facilities that support navigation to other facts similarly tagged with the same axis members?
Thanks, Michelle. Good question. Yes, the viewer allows you, one of the filters that you can use is to filter by any axes that's in that document. So if you want to look at property, plant, equipment by type axes, you'd be able to select that, and it'll show all the facts within the document that use that axis. You can also search on specific axes or members as well using the search feature and selecting the option to include the dimensions.
Okay.
And when you select a particular fact, it'll list what dimension axes are applied.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm sorry, let's see. Can you explain how the viewer handles multi-tagged data points, for example, in the parenthetical items?
Say again?
Let's see.
Multiple. Once again, I think this is
multi-tagged data points. Can we see how the viewer handles multi-tagged data points, for example, in the parenthetical items? I'm not quite sure what's being.
Right. I think what they mean is, let's suppose we have a figure it says $1 million in 1920 and 1921. Right. So that gets 2 tags wrapped around the single number. So which one does the viewer show? If you just click on it, it would actually be the innermost one. However, let me race to also say that both of those facts would actually appear in the right-hand list of all facts, from which you can also navigate. It's not like they're lost or invisible. They're both there. It's just you got to pick one to pop up in the box, and it would be the innermost one.
Okay, and I think this is the last question we'll take since we're running over, unless you all want to stick around for a long time and for a bit longer.
I'll stick around, sure.
Okay. Okay, question is, will the values in the derived instance document be scaled or unscaled?
They will be, right, they will, and the scaling will have been the scale parameter of the numeric tag will have been applied to the text to produce a full, robust XBRL instance document number. So if you have the number 3 and you've tagged it to say that scale equals 6, then it will come out in the extracted instance document and in the target document that's actually validated as 3 followed by 6 zeros.
Okay.
And that's those kind of inline XBRL basic questions, which, you know, a lot we could talk a lot about it, but it'd be easier to look back.
Okay. Does or how does the inline XBRL viewer connect to FASB codification?
Well, the purpose of the, I give it the simplest possible answer is that the viewer has available to it for search and viewing the codification references and text. Okay, so in other words, from an end user standpoint, it's right there in front of you. Okay, from a technical point of view, all of that, the references that are actually used in the instance document are compacted in and put into this thing called the metalinks file. So part of the purpose of the metalinks file is to carry along metadata that is going to be used by the viewer. So have 2 different answers. I don't know if that really I'm not sure what's maybe behind the question.
Yeah, it's hard to tell with some of these because they're trying to keep the verbiage brief here, but okay. When does the SEC expect to start receiving iXBRL documents in live filing submissions? I'm not sure there's an answer to that question at this point, but do you have any sense?
We are able to observe, we can't actually see the content, but we can observe when people are submitting test filings that are going through the Inline XBRL validator. Mm-hmm. And we've seen those almost from the very first day as test filings. There have been no live filings, and I would assume you wouldn't necessarily do it out of the normal cycle. And since it's mid-June and we expect a bunch of 10Qs to start coming in about 15 days after July 1st, you know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks from now.
Okay. Do we still need label link base while filing inline XBRL? I think the answer is yes. Correct, Walter?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Let's see. Another question: will the Will the HTML and iXBRL have to be done together? I don't see how internally one can prepare the XBRL portion and outsource the HTML part. And I think the answer to that, yes, they have to be created together. Right, John?
Well, you can outsource anything.
Exactly. I'd answer that the same way. I'd suggest it's probably easier to do them both and to think about them both at the same time. And indeed, the more you're doing that, then the more you have control over the messaging you're sending out to the world. But I'd be surprised if it wasn't able to be outsourced.
Okay. Does including the XBRL metadata in the HTML document, making inline XBRL, change anything about the HTML document itself?
Yeah, I'm actually just now typing the answer because it's a little complicated. The HTML document that is, in a sense, wrapped around the tags, it must be a well-formed XML document. Plain old HTML doesn't have to be well-formed XML. And so that's one difference. Another difference is that as an XML document, we have chosen not to support HTML entities. So you may have seen things like ampersand NBSP semicolon for a non-breaking space. Okay, we don't support those because you just need to say ampersand sharp sign 160 semicolon, which is just not that different, right? So in other words, you have to use the XML code for a non-printing character rather than the HTML entity. Other than that, you know, it's pretty much the same HTML. There's a section of the EFM 525, and it's probably along about subsection 3 or 4, where it lists exactly how Edgar HTML corresponds to Inline XBRL. So for example, there's all these tags that are not allowed in Edgar HTML, and a few of them are now allowed. So T-body, just to take a random example, not allowed in Edgar HTML, is allowed in XHTML. so what? T-Bot has been around for 15 years. It's not new. And so there's some subtle differences like that. But other than that, it seems to me you should be able to take almost any well-formed HTML document, or even if it's not well-formed, make it well-formed and begin tagging.
Okay. And Walter, I think you already answered this question, but currently XBRL files are submitted as Exhibit 101. With iXBRL, this would be eliminated, correct? Just confirming that.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the important thing, and I know that's probably the most significant surface change in the submission process.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, oh, where did it go? Well, it's now hidden inside the primary document.
Right.
The instance.
Yes, the tags that were in the instance are now inside the primary document.
Okay. And I think
we have to be really. We never ever call the inline XBRL document an instance, right? That's sort of a bit of mental hygiene there.
Okay, and I think we'll just go with one. Well, I think a lot of people have dropped off, but we still have quite a few on. Will secondary submission still be required minus the instance document? For instance, the schema and link bases. And I think you've answered that question too, Walter, right? They are required?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Does inline functionality allow for commenting for numerical values not tagged? Sorry, hang on, I just lost the question here.
Comment. I'm not. I think if they're just talking about an XML comment, then sure. I think they're probably thinking about some specific tool's ability to do that I'm not familiar with.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we have. We still have a number of additional questions, but some of them are very, very specific. Well, here's one last. Let's go with one last question. How does one file the schema and link-based documents?
Just the same. There's a attachment type called an ex101.sch for the schema. There's an ex1.lab for the labels. There's and all of those are still necessary and attached in exactly the same way. The only thing that changes is the ex101.ins. It goes away.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been really, really helpful, and I appreciate our speakers all staying on beyond, past the hour. What we're going to do is take all of the questions and probably sort through them, because I think there's some duplication in the questions, and we'll put together an FAQ based on the responses that the SEC staff and John Turner from XBL International gave today, and then make sure that anything that was not addressed, we include in the Q&A and send that out to everybody who's attended. We'll also be sending out a link to the replay for the program, and that'll probably come out tomorrow. Probably the Q&A will come out a bit later, probably not until next week. But thank you very much for attending. And if it seems like it makes sense, we may hold another educational forum like this to help make sure that answers or questions are addressed. So with that, I want to thank Walter and Mike and Matthew from the SEC and John from XBRL International. And any remaining words that anybody wants to say before we drop off?
Thank you for allowing us to share information and address questions. Greatly appreciate it, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Mike. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks everyone for your time.